fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I know it's been a while since I've posted any new videos. Just things are still hectic. I'm still having less and less time to make videos. I know I could always make time. I don't know, I'm trying my best, still shaking off the dust from the holidays. But this is the first review of 2021, and it's a film I've wanted to see for actually quite a while. I've known about it for a long time, never picked it up until just recently. I actually had it in my Christmas haul video. And I wanted to do this for my last 80s slasher marathon, but either I was unable to get it or I couldn't find a way to see it or whatever. But so now I'm finally getting to it, and it's from one of my favorite filmmakers ever, but I actually haven't seen this film until just now, and it's weird. It says Neo-Noir slasher. I know there's gonna be people in the comments saying that's not a slasher. It says slasher. Genres aren't subjective, but it does feel more like an erotic thriller with heavy giallo influence. But it's Brian De Palma's 1980 film Dressed to Kill. Now, I thought this was going to be more of like a super sophisticated 80s slasher with more of like a noir feel. Also being Brian De Palma, more of like an erotic thriller as well. But then while watching it, yeah, it definitely has that erotic thriller feel. I do see the neo-noir part of it. But it does feel more like the Americanized giallo than a slasher. You know, you have someone who's not in law enforcement, who is a witness to this murder, someone with a straight razor, so gets entangled in the case itself and then ends up solving it. It's not a giallo at all, but it is one of those American films that are heavily inspired by it. And also Brian De Palma, he again, one of my favorite filmmakers, definitely top 5 for me. He has always been considered, and I think it's always used negatively. I don't see it that way, sort of, because he is very influenced by Hitchcock, who isn't, but he does put a lot of Hitchcock references and influence in his films. And even though I would say Raising Cain is more like him finally getting his Psycho, when this film first came out, a lot of critics were calling it like a Psycho ripoff, a Hitchcock ripoff. But I think this is very well made. You don't hear a lot of people talking about it now. It still is labeled the slasher, so I'm going to call it that. I'm going to put it in my slasher playlist. I know there's people that think genre is subjective. I've been meaning to make a video about that. It's not. A movie is what it is. Even though we really get one on-screen death, it says it's a slasher. I'm not going to take that away from it. But, so yeah, gone on for almost 5 minutes about this movie. It was also written by Brian De Palma. I guess he was gonna, because this was 1980. Prior to this, he had done some other films, most notably Carrie, which is another one of my favorites of his. There's actually a lot of things I picked up while watching this, very similar to Carrie, like one of the opening shots and the closing shot, same as Carrie. Pino Donaggio did the music for this, as he did Carrie. A lot of the cues and even sounds of the music is the same. Also stars Nancy Allen, Chris the bully from Carrie. But basically, I think he wanted to make a movie. I think it was based on a book called Cruising, but he had a hard time securing the rights, and it ended up not being made. And what was it? He had always envisioned certain scenes, like two people sort of following each other in a museum and then meeting up with each other, and the elevator death. The two biggest scenes of this movie, he had kind of had storyboarded and played in his head a bunch of times, and he finally applied it to this. I know there's a Criterion Blu-ray of this. This was the first one I saw, and I had wanted it for a while, so I just picked this up. But it comes with like a 43-minute making of, which is awesome. Unrated, R-rated, TV-rated, comparison featurette. Appreciation by Keith Gordon featurette, which it was cool to see Keith Gordon as well. Also have Angie Dickinson, Michael Caine. But anyway, I know I'm all over the place. See, this is what happens when it's been so long since you made a video. It opens up with this scene in the bathroom. We have Angie Dickinson, who plays this sort of desperate housewife. She's sexually frustrated. I kind of got the impression that, you know, her looks are kind of going, she feels her sexual value is going down. She's in the shower washing herself. Her husband is shaving. And she keeps looking through the glass as she's watching herself, like, kind of get the idea she wants to be noticed, but he doesn't. And we get really up-close shots of her body as she's washing herself, which those shots and the music is very much like the opening to Carrie. And then she goes to her psychiatrist, Dr. Elliot, played by Michael Caine. She talks about her recurring fantasy of wanting to have a spontaneous encounter and meeting someone in a public place. She even tries to seduce him, and it doesn't work. So then she leaves. She ends up going to the art museum, and the art museum is one of the most Brian De Palma scenes I think I've ever seen. I mean, this is Brian De Palma porn. And I don't mean that because of the eroticism. It is all the tropes and signatures and styles that De Palma is known for. At least with his thrillers. Because, you know, with De Palma you have either the gangster flick or you have the thriller flick. You know, whether you have the split screens with two different, like juxtaposed things going on, or you have something in the foreground that's on focus with someone in the background that's in focus, or like the visual storytelling, which is the art museum scene. When she's in this art museum, she's kind of watching people look at art, and then this guy sits next to her, and she keeps trying to get him to notice her, but he's not looking at her. He's just looking at this piece of art. She takes her glove off. I think she thinks her wedding ring is off, but it's actually on because she's trying to get his attention. Eventually he looks at her and she kind of looks at him and smiles, but he looks away and you can tell she's... I kind of got the idea that she's not used to that. Like, not used to someone kind of not noticing her. So then she gets up and kind of follows him around the museum. But then she kind of backs off. And then he follows her through the museum. When she got up, she dropped one of her gloves. So that he picks it up, puts it on. He goes to get her attention. But then she's like, oh, gets mad at him. She goes to get her glove, but then we see the split screen of her realizing he was wearing it. So then she follows him again through the museum. And there is no dialogue through this. It's all done in a tracking shot, which De Palma has always been great with tracking shots. I think my favorite is still the following of the prom king and queen votes in Carrie, that tracking shot. But this one is still very good. Until eventually she goes out to his taxi, which when she opens the doors, she must say sorry for following him. He grabs her, kisses her. There's no dialogue. And I guess originally De Palma told Angie Dickinson that it was going to be done with narration so that she could really act out the emotions that she was feeling, knowing she was going to have to do voiceover later. But he only told her that so that she would really emote what's going on with no planning at all to put narration in it. And that just shows the genius of Brian De Palma. And I love that whole museum sequence. The way the music is... I actually don't even remember if there's music in the beginning when she's by herself. But the music just keeps building up, building and building and building. Until it's like this big bombastic music by the time she leaves the museum. And it's just a perfect sequence of just visual storytelling, of just these two people kind of following each other, then backing off to get the other one to follow that person. Very interesting, all done with no dialogue. And again, the way he got her to just emote everything, it worked out. Then we had the long scene of them in the cab, which she had to act a lot of orgasms in this movie. She says she spent a lot of time, sort of faking orgasms for these scenes in the back seat of a taxi. So then they end up back at her place. She goes to leave, but she can't find her underwear and then we realize that her underwear was taken off in the cab and left there. But as she leaves his apartment and goes into the elevator, when the doors open up, we see someone, this blonde woman in a black leather jacket and a straight razor. She comes in, Angie Dickinson puts her hand up, she gets slashed. Again, the Pino Donaggio music comes in. She gets her throat slit. And then Nancy Allen is a call girl who was servicing a client on some other floor. She goes to get on the elevator but sees Angie Dickinson bleeding and reaching up to her. But in the elevator's mirror in the corner, she sees the blonde killer standing behind the door waiting for her to come in. That's why she doesn't go in. Excuse me. And so then the next scene picks up at the police department. So now Nancy Allen is the prime suspect in the killing and also she is the next target for the killer. And basically, I want to get the guy who played the detective. Dennis Franz played Detective Marino. But also in the scene, we were introduced to Keith Gordon, who is the son of Angie Dickinson, which of course he was in Jaws 2. He was Arnie and Christine. He's like a computer building nerd who starts doing his own way to figure out who the killer is, because he finds out that Nancy Allen saw the killer. Then eventually they team up. But I think this was one of the references that people picked up to Psycho, was because we're following Angie Dickinson, who, you know, lead, blonde, just like a Hitchcock girl. We're following her like she's the lead in the film, and then she gets killed off at the end of the first act. And then we follow Nancy Allen. But basically, Nancy Allen has 48 hours to prove her alibi, or else she's going to be booked for the murder. And of course, her alibi can't be reached. All the while, Michael Caine is getting these threatening phone calls from someone named Bobby, who I guess is this transsexual former patient of his that stole his straight razor. He knows that Bobby is the killer, but before he goes to turn her in, he wants to talk to her one last time. And so the rest of the movie is Michael Caine trying to reach Bobby and Nancy Allen being stalked by Bobby. And yes, I know, I was fine before I started making this video. Now I'm starting to sound stuffed up again. People keep bringing it up in the comments no matter what I say. And this movie's just so full of suspense. And before I get into spoilers, I will say once you figure out who the killer is, and then you start thinking back to other scenes throughout the movie, it does leave you the breadcrumbs. I will say, I didn't see it coming. I was surprised by the reveal at the end. And then again, you know, like Psycho, because it is, you know, this transsexual dressed like a woman, which that was why Bobby dropped Michael Caine as a psychiatrist, because he refused to sign off on the sexual reassignment surgery. But then after the reveal, we kind of get the Scooby-Doo explanation scene. So, I'm going to get into spoilers now, but if you're a fan of Brian De Palma's horror or thriller films, definitely check this out. Or if you like sort of noir or erotic thrillers, or even Italian giallos, because this does have a lot of the signatures of a giallo. It's not a giallo. It's an American film, but... And I'm sure, because anytime there's a mystery and a reveal, people will say, as soon as I read the title, I could figure out who the killer was. No, you didn't. But they do leave the breadcrumbs. And when I started thinking back about it, I was like, oh, it's very cleverly written. And I will say this is... I'm ashamed I didn't see this movie long ago when I first heard of it. But it's now one of my favorite Brian De Palma films. But getting into spoilers. Nancy Allen goes to meet a client so she can get some extra money. And she is then followed from on the street into a cab, which the cab driver was the guy who was in like the double impaling scene of Friday the 13th Part 2. She's followed in a cab and then down into the subway station, and then she gets on the subway and there's some like street punks and the killer that are looking for her. And eventually, when the killer finally catches up to her, Keith Gordon uses some homemade mace to stop her. And Keith Gordon, we see him do some of his own investigation, like he has a stopwatch to time all the people coming in and out of Kane's office. Then he sets up this bike with a box on it with a camera in the back with a hole cut out so he can time the camera to catch people going in and out. And Keith Gordon doesn't... I always like seeing him in movies. He does do a good job in this. So they team up and they start going through his film, the photos he had, and they see that Bobby was the last one to come out of his office. And so then they realize they have to get his appointment booked, so Nancy Allen decides to go in and seduce him. So she goes in, she starts, talking sexually, like, do you think I'm attractive? Do you want to fuck me? Do you mind if I take my coat off? And then she's wearing hooker regalia. And then, of course, that's when we find out the killer is Michael Caine. She goes in the next room. She says she's going to freshen up. She says, when I come back, your clothes better be off and you better be ready to have sex. But she's actually in this other part of his office looking through his appointment book. And this Keith Gordon is outside watching with binoculars. And we're supposed to believe that the killer is attacking Keith Gordon because he's attacked by a blonde as well. But it's sort of... I'm trying to explain it. It's easy to explain, but there's a lot going on because it's all built up to this scene. But, okay, so the fact Michael Caine cannot get a hold of Bobby. The fact that Bobby was the last one to leave his office. The fact that Bobby stole his razor. When Angie Dickinson tried to seduce him, right as he said, no, I don't want to, have sex with you because I'm married and it's unethical, he looks at himself in the mirror, kind of gives himself a look, and that's when he looks back at her and gives the reason why no. And so here, when Nancy Allen tries to seduce him, she goes to the next room, he looks at himself in the mirror again, then he starts to undo his clothes, so we think he's going to give in, but he's actually changing. So Bobby is the female part of Caine's mind. Oh, and also earlier, he went to go talk to Bobby's new psychiatrist. But when he said, I know Bobby killed that woman in the elevator, actually, I'll get to that when I get to the Scooby-Doo ending. So Bobby is the female part of his mind, and when he is sexually aroused by a woman, it's arousing the male part of him, so that's when Bobby comes in jealousy to kill the woman that made him aroused. And so when Keith Gordon is attacked by a blonde, it's actually a blonde woman that's working with the detective who knew she was innocent all along. He just kind of played her so she would act a certain way. So the blonde shoots Kane, and then we're in the a detective's office while the other psychiatrist is giving us the Scooby-Doo ending. But that's also why Bobby was the last one to leave his office, because he was leaving for the night. So the breadcrumbs are put there throughout the film. I don't know why I didn't pick up on it. Probably because there was a lot going on. I don't know. But yeah, it is. I was shocked by it. Like, holy, it was him the whole time. But then once they explained it, and I started thinking of all the scenes throughout the film, I was like, oh, now I feel stupid. And so then we get sort of the epilogue where we get this beautifully lit scene with like all these blues, like almost looks like a scene from an Argento movie, where this nurse comes in to check on Michael Caine. He wakes up and attacks and kills her. He starts to undress her to take her clothes. But we get like this upward shot, kind of like in a courtyard, indoor, or like a foyer. And there's all these mental patients on all the different levels up. He takes her clothes. Nancy Allen's at Keith Gordon's house taking a shower, where she is attacked by Caine dressed as a nurse. But she wakes up. It was a nightmare. She's screaming. Gordon comes in and consoles her from her nightmare. It's like this upward angle of the bed of him trying to console her. Like the ending of Carrie, when, why can't I remember her name? Someone will correct me. The survivor of Carrie. She wakes up from her nightmare and her mother tries to console her. So, and the music is very similar as well, so I would say there's about an equal amount of references, Psycho to Carrie, even though I think maybe Carrie was a little less incidental than the Psycho and Hitchcock references. But I really liked this movie. I thought it was a really good mystery. Other than the references of a killer dressing as the opposite sex, getting the Scooby-Doo explanation at the end, following the blonde lead as if she's the lead, and then killing her at the end of the first act. Yeah, that was like Psycho, but there's the way it was filmed and just like all the different camera techniques and the style is so original to Brian De Palma that it is more of an original film than a complete ripoff of something. At least that's the way I see it. But it says slasher, but so that's what I'm going to go with. That is slasher. I'm not going to try and say, well, in my opinion, it's something else, so that's what I'm going to call it. It is what it is, a neo-noir slasher with some erotic thriller, and I don't even know if he really was influenced by Italian giallo, but it's more like the circumstances of the story, like how she's a witness, then the killer follows her, she has to solve it. But I really enjoyed this movie. It's got plenty of suspense, very visually interesting because of all the De Palma-isms and just the visual storytelling of scenes like the art museum. I guess Nancy Allen received both a Golden Globe Award nomination and a Golden Raspberry Award. So she got a Golden Globe and a Razzie nomination. Uh, Kane also received some praise. I want to see what some, because a lot of people really did call it like a Hitchcock Psycho ripoff. And I think almost every time he's done a thriller, because he's so influenced by Hitchcock, people have kind of always said that. Like, he's trying too much to be like Hitchcock. But he's such his own filmmaker that I think it works. But I really like Dressed to Kill. It was well worth the wait to see it. Even though I just gave it all away. If you haven't seen it, definitely go check it out. There is a Criterion Blu-ray, like I said, but I have this, and I'm totally happy with it. But that's the first review for 2021. I know it feels a little disjointed, and I'm all over the place, but I wish I had as much time as I used to when I used to. There was a time where I was doing like 7 or 8 videos a day, and now it's like I'm lucky if I get one day a week to do videos. But anyway, hopefully I find my groove, or get my groove back a little more as 2021 goes on. But anyway, I'm thank you for watching.